Let's start just with a very short review of what we were doing last time. We were talking about abstract expressionism, primarily an American art movement. The first generation of abstract expressionism included artists such as Jackson Pollock, Mark Rothko, and Willem de Kooning. Their art was considered a new and uniquely American approach to painting, which involved gestural mark making, spontaneity, and an emphasis on communicating emotion. They were supported by probably the most influential art critic of the 20th century, Clement Greenberg, who was less interested in subject matter or meaning and was instead focused on formalism, concerns such as color, line, and space, and the compositional arrangement of elements within the picture plane. Sorry, but you may be asking, where were the women? Well, during the 40s and 50s in the New York art scene, there were many female artists who were making and exhibiting their work alongside their male peers. They did not, however, get the recognition or the media attention that their male counterparts received. Abstract expressionism, with its bold and aggressive approach towards painting, was a notably male-dominated field, and the women who were working alongside these men were largely ignored by the media, the textbooks, and the documentation of the times. But these women were also experimenting with materials and attitudes toward painting, and they were questioning artistic convention. Lee Krasner, Joan Mitchell, Helen Frankenthaler, just a few examples of artists who are now widely recognized for the important contributions that they made to the development of this new American art. And this is Lee Krasner, Feathering from 1959. You can see the bold and aggressive line work that suggests calligraphy or something like automatic drawing. There's a dancing figure here on the left. Now she was often defined by her role as Jackson Pollock's supportive wife. Krasner was intimately involved in the development of abstract expressionism and its synthesis of abstract form and psychological concerns. Her work is now considered to be as ambitious and powerful as any abstractions made in mid-century America. This is Joan Mitchell. Mitchell was influenced by artists such as Paul Cézanne and Willem de Kooning. She's considered a principal figure in the second generation of abstract expressionists, so she was more active in the late 60s and 70s. Her work is often large and painted on multiple panels, and landscape is her primary subject matter. This is a very late painting. She made this in the later years of her life. This is called Sunflowers. It's made in 1991. This is Helen Frankenthaler. She was a major figure in post-war American painting. Frankenthaler's lyrical atmospheric paintings, often employing a stain and soak approach to her materials that she invented. This expanded the possibilities of abstraction. This approach was mostly used during the 1950s and early 60s. This is called The Bay from 1963. This is an example of how she would pour the paint and let it pool on the canvas and let the stain sort of spread across these areas of color. Okay, now if we're going to address the importance of ideas in the development of modern art, we should probably go back to Marcel Duchamp, who was born in 1887 and lived until 1968. No single figure in the history of modern art has had as profound an impact as Marcel Duchamp. This is called The Chess Game from 1911. Now, Marcel Duchamp was born in Normandy, France. He grew up in a cultured family. His grandfather had been a painter, and he had two older brothers and a younger sister, all of whom would go on to become artists. Duchamp followed his older brothers to art school, and he began working in the post-impressionist style that was popular at the time. This is an example of his paintings during that time. Duchamp's older brothers were associated with a group of Cubist artists who would get together at his brother's home for regular discussions. Now, Duchamp was not interested in the seriousness of these discussions or in their focus on purely visual concerns, but the theories did make their way into his paintings. A portrait of chess players makes use of the fragmentation, multiple perspectives of cubism, but he had something else. a suggestion in the area surrounding the figures of the unseen mental activities of his two brothers as they're playing chess. And this is a little painting from 1911 called The Coffee Mill. Now, the influence of Cubism and Futurism is clear in The Coffee Mill, with its use of fractured lines and its repeated elements, which suggest the movement of the machine. Duchamp said, "I made this old-fashioned coffee mill for him," and he's talking about his brother Raymond. "It shows the different facets of the coffee grinding operation. The handle on top is seen simultaneously in several positions as it revolves. You can see the ground coffee in a heap under the cogwheels of the central shaft, which turns in the directions of the arrow on top." Here's an arrow indicating the direction in which the machine turns. He said the painting was based on the idea of dismantling the grinder, and it represents the first time Duchamp shows an interest in machine forms. It almost looks like a diagram. The depiction of the handle in different positions indicates an interest in the idea of incorporating movement in painting. Now, the coffee grinder will reappear as an important subject or a character in Duchamp's work as his work evolves. This is Nude Descending the Staircase from 1912. And this is the first of Duchamp's work that would generate controversy. This was painted in 1912, but it was exhibited in America at the Armory Show in New York City in 1913. This was the exhibition that's credited with really introducing an American audience to all these advances in European art that we've been looking at. Now, it depicts a nude figure descending diagonally from the upper left to the lower right. The geometric shapes at the bottom suggest stairs. And the controversy mostly had to do with the figure's robotic, almost violent appearance. Okay, at a time when depictions of the female form were generally concerned with conveying grace and elegance. And again, remember, the controversy was in America. In Europe, people were probably more open to a wider range of possibilities in terms of depicting the female form. But in America, things were still quite conservative. And his nude only really registered to that audience as a woman because of the conventional attitudes of the time that most nudes in art were women. Really, it looked like a robot. And while it does owe its fragmentation to Cubism, the sense of movement conveyed in the painting seems more closely related to the photographic experiments of Edward Muybridge. Now, Edward Muybridge, he was an English-American photographer known for his pioneering work in photographic studies of animal and human locomotion. So this is one of the things that the photography was being used for by people who are curious about the world. These multi-framed images that Muybridge put together for the first time gave people a clear view of how animals and humans actually moved through the world. Retinal art, intended only to please the eye. Now, they say no press is bad press, and he did get some bad press in America when he exhibited Nude Descending the Staircase. But it cemented his position as a controversial yet significant painter. His response to his newfound celebrity was to quit painting. He dismissed the work of many of his fellow artists as retinal art intended only to please the eye, and he began working on projects that would engage the mind instead. He began making drawings and notes for the large glass, which he would continue working on for over a decade. This is an example of one of these notes. This was actually sold at auction at the Christie's auction house for a lot of money quite recently. It's called Marcel Duchamp, Pendu Femelle, Female Hanged Body. It's a manuscript note. And it's manuscript note and colored pencil, charcoal, and India ink on paper, drawn in 1913. So he rejected painting and started working on other things. This is Bicycle Wheel in 1913. In 1913, Duchamp attached an upside-down bicycle wheel to a stool in his studio. And even he probably didn't quite grasp the significance of this act until some time later. I had the happy idea to fasten a bicycle wheel to a kitchen stool and to just watch it turn. That was all. He compared the bicycle wheel to having a fireplace in his studio. He would just sit and watch it the way you would just sit and watch the flames in the fireplace. The idea of these ready-mades, which they would become called, was not fully developed until 1914. This is Bottle Rack. This is from 1914. Now, Duchamp said that the idea behind these ready-mades was probably the most important single idea to come out of my work. The first ready-made was a common mass-produced bottle drying rack that he bought at a store, and without altering it in any way, he declared it to be a work of art. This seemingly simple yet somewhat audacious act, transforming an object into a work of art by declaring it as a work of art, it raised significant philosophical questions, such as what is art, and who says so, and what is it exactly that artists do? What does it mean for an object to be meaningful, and how is meaning created? They say he didn't do anything to it, he didn't alter it in any way, but he did sign it, Marcel Duchamp. You can see his signature in the bottom of it. No, Kitty, no. Can you stop it, please? I'm recording. And this is In Advance of a Broken Arm. This is from 1915. In Advance of a Broken Arm is a mass-produced snow shovel. It was selected by Duchamp and hung from the ceiling of his studio. This is signed as well, and I think it's titled In Advance of the Broken Arm is written on it, on the handle, I believe. His ready-mades often had humorous titles. In Advance of a Broken Arm playfully refers to the snow shovel's purpose, to remove the snow shovel, or to remove the snow in order to avoid the accident that would otherwise occur if one slipped and fell and, theoretically broke an arm. And this is Fountain from 1917. This is perhaps his most famous work. Fountain was a urinal purchased at a plumbing supply store, and it was signed R. Mutt. And it was submitted under that name to an exhibition sponsored by the Society of Independent Artists that Duchamp had helped found. Okay, now the society was bound by its constitution to accept all work that was submitted by members of the group. It was fundamentally designed as a democratic, collection of artists, right? But the board voted to exclude Fountain, declaring it indecent. Duchamp resigned from the board in protest, declaring in response that the exclusion of Fountain was censorship and that it was in direct conflict with the spirit of the exhibition. So the piece never made it into the exhibition, but photographs of it made it perhaps one of his most well-known works. It's another very well-known work. This is The Bride Stripped Bare by Her Bachelors Even, also called The Large Glass. It started in 1915. The plan for it that we looked at, one of the plans for it that we looked at was dated 1913. Now, Duchamp called The Large Glass a hilarious picture, and he worked on it for more than 8 years. It's made from 2 large panes of glass, and it's meant to be viewed from all sides, like a sculpture. Now, the painted elements were made with non-traditional materials like wire, aluminum foil, varnish, and even dust that he would allow to collect on the surface for weeks before affixing it with adhesive glue. It reads like a diagram, the components of the depicted machine all having allegorical significance. There's a bride at the top that looks like a bug of some sort, and she's flirting with the bachelors. These are the 9 strange cylinders in the lower half. She's stripping for them. They all find her very attractive, and they're competing for her affection. But sadly, they seem to exist in a different dimension. They're having trouble communicating with her. There's a rectangular glider which activates the scissors that makes the chocolate grinder go, and there's an illuminating gas that's transformed into liquid, and it's pumped through a magnifying glass and then shot by each of the bachelors into the bride's realm. So there's the bachelors, and up here's the bride. When they say the bachelors are separated from the bride, that she's in a different dimension. They're talking about the division between the two pieces of glass. Now, Duchamp stopped working on the large glass in 1923, deciding that it should remain definitively unfinished. Now, in 1927, he was thrilled to learn that the work had been damaged while it was being shipped to an exhibition in Brooklyn. He said that the accidental cracking of the glass had finished the piece in a way that he never could have. He spent about a month painstakingly repairing it by securing the fragmented shards of glass with glue in 1936. This is the notes from the Green Box from 1934. Now, another way the work was finished was through the publication of this edition of selected notes detailing the thought process behind Duchamp's masterpiece. Now, the notes are in no particular order, allowing the viewer the opportunity to become active participants in the arrangement and interpretation of the contents of the box. Now, again, these are a reproduction of the notes that he made in preparation for the large glass. And they're all printed on different types of paper and all hand-torn, so they look just like the original notes. Now, in the large glass, in the subsequent publication of the notes from the Green Box, Duchamp is striving to make work that, unlike the retinal art of his peers, is driven by the intellect. Now, this will become known as conceptual art, but in an odd twist, it might be argued that his most profound influence may have been on the painters that challenged the predominance of the abstract expressionists in the 1950s. This is Robert Rauschenberg. This is Satellite from 1955. Now, Satellite is a combine. That's what Robert Rauschenberg called the painting, sculpture, collage works that he made between 1954 and 1964. Some combines hang on the walls. Some of them are actual freestanding sculptures. They combine the improvised, expressive painting style of the abstract expressionists with a proliferation of collage materials and found objects. Satellite, for instance, features a painted pheasant perched on the top edge of a large painting that includes newspaper comic strips, doilies, and a pair of socks. None of the objects or images in his combines were chosen in order to convey a particular meaning. He asserted that the meaning depended on the many ways that one could interpret the proliferation of elements. So he's leaving the interpretation or the meaning of the painting up to the viewer. This is Bed from 1955. Now, Bed, like many of the combines from this period, includes ordinary objects from the real world. The artist used his sheet, his quilt, and his pillow, and he scribbled on them with pencil, and he splattered them with paint in a manner that echoed the paint handling of the abstract expressionists. Now, the story behind Bed is that Rauschenberg wanted to paint, but he had no money to buy canvas. It was very simply put together because I actually had nothing to paint on, he recalled years later, except it was summertime and it was hot, so I didn't need the quilt. So the quilt was, I thought, abstracted, but it wasn't abstracted enough so that no matter what I did to it, it kept saying, I'm a bed. So finally I gave in and I gave it a pillow. Rauschenberg admired Marcel Duchamp, particularly Duchamp's playful irreverence. He remarked that Duchamp's recognition of the lack of art in art and the artfulness of everything was among the most important contributions to the art of our time. This is Monogram, 1955 to 1959. And Rauschenberg famously declared that he wanted to work in the gap between art and life. Now, by this, he meant that he wanted to question what was the distinction between art objects and everyday objects. This is very similar to Duchamp's idea of the ready-made, right? Now, these ideas, of course, made their way to these younger artists directly through the work of Marcel Duchamp. Monogram includes a stuffed Angora goat that Rauschenberg bought at a local furniture shop with a tire around its middle. He spent 4 years working through many variations of this piece, trying to figure out a way to successfully integrate the goat into a combine. And this is Jasper Johns. Now, Robert Rauschenberg had said this about his approach to art making. He said, I was bombarded with TV sets and magazines by the refuse, by the excess of the world. I thought that if I could paint or make an honest work, it should incorporate all of these objects, which were and are a reality. Now, as a young artist in the 1950s, he was not persuaded by the macho styles and the attitudes of the abstract expressionists. The paintings that they were making to him just did not represent the reality that he was living. The heroic idea of the quest for sincere, sublime expression, it seemed like posturing to this younger generation that was coming onto the scene. And Jasper Johns, he was a few years younger than Rauschenberg, and in paintings such as Flag, this is Flag from 1954, he was also addressing the ambiguity of art-life distinctions by presenting both a thing, a flag, and its representation, a painting of a flag. Now, you think about what a flag is. It's essentially color on a piece of cloth. Now, that's all this is. There's nothing else in the painting. The image extends right to the very edge of the canvas. So, in a sense, it is a flag. But it would be hard to argue that it isn't also a painting of a flag or a representation of a flag. So it's both. It's both a flag and a representation of a flag. Things the mind already knows. Now, Jasper Johns' decision to choose to paint everyday images and materials in his work, such as flags or targets, this is green target, or maps or letters or numbers, echoed Marcel Duchamp's idea of the ready-made. And challenged the dominant trend in painting at the time, which was, of course, abstract expressionism. Now, he called these commonplace, recognizable objects things the mind already knows. And he said that they gave him a great deal of freedom because he didn't have to design them. It gave him room to work on other levels, specifically the making of the painting. Here's the last one I'll show you tonight. This is Numbers in Color from 1959. So again, like the flag, like the target, there's nothing else in this painting besides numbers. You see the numbers run from 0 to 9 and from 0 to 9, and then they continue 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So the system gives him something to paint without having to think about designing the painting. Okay, let's stop there, and we'll continue next week with more about how ideas shaped the development of modern art. I'll see you next week.